the power of model building I did not fully appreciate until later. For me, first, the model was a way to see, well, does it work? And then, of course, I wanted to make a big one. And I didn't have room or finances to make a big one, so I made a moderate-sized one that had all the vices of a big one and none of the virtues. But this, again, was on purpose because I wanted to explore the stress problems. And a small, powerful machine would have much more stresses than a large, weak one. And I certainly got my belly full of stresses. These things took over a year to rebuild, and I blew up about 3 before I got it to hold together under the 20 horsepower from the outboard motor that I was using to drive it. But when I finally did get it to hold together, I realized that it wasn't the right way to do it. And I had to throw the whole thing out and start over with a simpler rotor, called the shaft-driven rotor. Instead of pulling it around with the little propellers spinning around, it was driven from the shaft, just the way they are now. And I attended the Rotary Wing meeting where I heard Sikorsky present his paper and show his films. And Sikorsky told a delightful story about the Russian fisherman who always paid for things in fish. And this way he thought it didn't cost him anything. But if he'd kept a record, as Igor Sikorsky said, he would have found that it was really costing him more because he was paying more for the fish than if he paid cash. So Sikorsky used this to prove that you might as well pay for the tail rotor, that rather than have 2 rotors going in opposite directions. That was his main reason for selecting the tail rotor. And I was convinced by that, and from then on stuck to the tail rotor, although I did make experiments with the coaxial. But this took me back to small models. But now I'd learned how to simplify, or I was no longer intrigued with all these gearing problems. That's the way it is. Once you know how to do things, you lose interest in them. So I became more interested. Then, would it fly? Which I had not bothered with before. And that was, well, that was some kind of crack in my armor, because I really didn't entertain the possibility that it wouldn't fly was a problem. I assumed that once you got all the machinery turning over, that was all there was to it. But at any rate, I found that they wouldn't fly. They were quite unstable, these models. And that gave me a much more interesting problem. Now I could forget about all the gears and things and concentrate on this question of stability. And that meant that I had to make flights and have wrecks and do it all without losing my stride. Whereas many earlier helicopters had sort of got their backing, and after years of working put something together and then had its trial flight, and the thing would crash, and then the backers backed out and the project collapsed. But I realized that the energy had to come in after the crack-ups rather than before, because the crack-ups were teaching you something. So by concentrating on the small models, which I could crack up at the rate of 1 a day, say, I could get ahead.